What is going on YouTube? This is the video you have been waiting for. This is part 2 of my Yamaha R6 engine teardown. Right now I have the engine on a stand I got from Harbor Freight. Made some brackets for it so it could fit a 1,000-pound engine stand. $100, super good deal. Same stand I used in my last video. Although this will be the last time I am using this stand. I've done a little bit more research. I think I know where I went wrong, and now it's just time to tear it down. So let's get to it. Alright, so first order of business on today's video, we're going to be starting the teardown on the engine itself. This is a 2012 YZF R6 motor. It does have a spun connector rod bearing. Don't know which one yet, don't know why it's starved. I have a feeling it's because the connector rod was out of round, where we've yet to see. But what I'm going to start doing is I have all my tools laid out here. I have some rags, which are going to be extremely handy. Gloves, of course. Plastic bags, because anytime you take bolts off, you want to be able to put them in, label it. I have a Sharpie. Make sure you just write down, valve cover bolts, head studs, head bolts, clutch cover bolts. You want to make sure that you're taking note of everything that comes off the engine and organizing it, so when it comes to reassembly, it'll be a lot easier. I'm going to start by removing the valve cover. I'm going to make sure there's no more oil left in it. I'm going to pull the spark plugs out and then just work my way down. This stand can flip 180 degrees, turn 90 degrees, so as I go along I will be turning the engine, moving it around so I can get specific parts off. I have an impact, I have all the tools here. I would go over in detail which tools I'm using. I'll say which ones I'm using, but if you are planning on doing an R6 teardown video, Partzilla did a phenomenal job making a video to make this possible, so that's how I know all of this information. Hopefully I can just throw in some basic or additional tips and tricks that will help you if you run into any problems, because last time I did take it apart, there were some things that I came across that they didn't mention in the video, so I'll make sure I mention those this time, but let's get into it. So as I'm taking off these camshafts, if you're planning on doing a valve job and retiming your engine when you're done, it's a good note to at least make sure the chain does not fall down below when you remove the camshafts. And you do want your engine set at top dead center. I'm not worried about timing right now because this whole entire thing is coming apart and I'm going to have to retime it from the get. So just for those who are using this video as an informational source, make sure that your engine is set to top dead center before you pull it apart. You can do that through the pickup rotor cover down here by removing these bolts or this cap right here, but you're better off just removing these bolts and you can access the end of the crank. It is a 13mm bolt, and once you do that, there's a little mark, a timing mark, so you look for the split in the casing and you line up the T with the split in the casing, and that will set your engine to top dead center. I'll show you guys when I pull that off. So the pickup rotor cover, which I just removed here, exposes the bottom half of the engine where the casing meets, and there's a little T here. I'll show you in just a second. That lines up with the split in the casing. If you are adjusting your valves, you want to make sure your engine is set to top dead center, where this little T, this line here, matches with the split in the casing. They also show it in a Partzilla video. Makes life really easy if you go to watch that video. Hopefully this one will help as well. But this is the bottom of the crankshaft here, and the gears which drive the timing chain all the way up to the camshafts up here. So if you are doing a valve job or anything that is in regards or associated with timing of the engine, this T, which hopefully it focuses in right there, is supposed to line up with the split in the casing, which you can kind of see right there, right at the tip of my finger. So that, to that, this is a 13 millimeter, just to let you know. The cam chain tensioner, which is located towards the intake side of the engine above your clutch cover casing, is on the back here. 2 bolts. This will release the tension on the cam chain so we can remove the cams safely. And if you're wondering what all this stuff is on my engine, all this goop, it is fire extinguisher, because, well, it's a long story. I'll explain. So, to explain the fire extinguisher, I had brought my bike to my buddy's shop to have him figure out why it wouldn't start. And it was getting fuel, it was getting spark, it was actually dumping a lot of fuel into the cylinders, and when it finally ignited, the off few times that it did, it combusted so much fuel that it started a fire on top of my engine. My intake was off, and he was able to put it out with the fire extinguisher, and it's all because I had the coil pack harness on backwards, so it was not firing properly at the right time. So if you're putting the harness back on, just make sure you hook it up the right way. When you're taking these off, you can tell this is the intake side because obviously it's on the intake side, and you can tell this is the exhaust because it's on the exhaust side. But you can also see on the caps here, you can see that there are arrows in which the caps should point here, here, and here. And you also see that is I1, you do have I2, and then I1, and that's just indicating the intake. And then on the exhaust side, these do have E2, E1, and E1, or E-1 for those. So you can tell the two cams apart. And if you want to tell the difference between the exhaust camshaft and the intake camshaft, there is this extrusion on the exhaust, and it is not on the intake. So that's another way to differentiate them. Also, there are usually paint markings on the ends of the cam gears, which will determine which one is the intake and which one is the exhaust. And upon inspection, initial inspection, as I'm dripping oil everywhere, these look like they're in awesome shape. There is still a ton of oil in them, which is good. They were getting good lubrication. There are no grooves that I can feel just by my thumb, and all of the lobes look great. No uneven wear. Everything looks as it should be, so good stuff. Alright, so up next I'm going to be pulling the head studs out of here. So I believe it consists of these two on the end, these two, these two, these two, these two, and then the two caps on the end here. So that's 12 total. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So it's going to go in this sequence here. I'll mark it on the video just so if any of you are referencing to this, this is the exact sequence. We're going to go 1/2 turn at a time till it's loose. And then before I pull the head, I'm going to pull out the cam chain guides on the side here. There's just 2 dowels by the pickup rotor cover where I can just pull those out, slide them out the top, and then the chain will be able to fall freely. And if you can see below, I do have a little bit of oil coming down. I pulled the drain plug and it all settled after I got it on the stand, so that's good. That I didn't decide to open this up before I did that. So the next part of the process I took on was removing the head lugs, or the head bolts. There are 12 of them total, 2 Allen, and then 2 nuts that are on the right side outside of the engine. I'm loosening the ones that are inside the engine here. After I'm done, I'm able to slide the head right off and see the cylinders. Now with the valve head off of the bike, I'm starting to remove everything that's on the outside of the block just so I can separate the crankcase and see what happened to the inside of the engine. It's kind of crazy, all of these little parts and details that Yamaha has put into the engine, and when you're taking it apart it really makes you appreciate how nicely engineered it is. plate assembly. There's a bearing. It's this washer, it's this plate, and then this bad boy.
Now that I have everything removed from the outside of the crankcase, I'm able to begin removing every bolt that holds the two pieces of the crankcase together, and I'll be able to further inspect the crankshaft, remove all of the pistons, and see the condition of the bearing that spun. And the result was no surprise. Cylinder 1 was the bearer of bad news. I rotated the crank to confirm that none of the other ones were loose, and it was only cylinder 1 that would click and had any play. With the final discovery that there will need to be a new crankshaft and bearing installed, since the crankshaft was out of round, these are the two halves of the cases, the main journal bearings here, which did wear properly. It was just the one crank bearing that was off with the piston. So, here goes another rebuild. We'll see you in the next one.